Good afternoon. My name's Pete, also known as Risk for Rewards, or over on Twitter at Risk for Rewards. Currently got around 17,300-ish followers over there. So if you're not following and you want to, if you click over there, that's where you get a lot of my written content. And that's where my Aintree blog will be posted from this afternoon. That will have all the stats, who I backed last year, and whether I was right or wrong last year. So you can see if I kind of know what I'm talking about in that race, even though it's a short sample. And also my final selections, verdicts, and a bit of analysis on other runners throughout the next 3 days for the Aintree Festival. Over here on YouTube, if you haven't already subscribed, if you click the link to subscribe, you'll get the content first. Like, I will tweet this out later on, probably this evening, but at the moment this video will go live in approximately about an hour's time. So anyone who's already subscribing will have already seen it. Any likes and any comments are much appreciated. If you've got a nap for the week if you've got a nap for Thursday or Friday, then throw it on there. So we can go back and forth about it. This is a preview for the first 2 days of the Aintree Festival. These are my thoughts and initial selections. Some races I'll give you all the analysis I've got so far. I just might not have a selection yet just because I don't know about the ground, and obviously that will come up on Twitter. I'm also going to try and give TikTok a go. I've got no idea how it really works, but I'm going to try and give it a go because some people, when they're at work or if they're on the go, they don't have time to sit and watch a YouTube video like this. So tomorrow I'll try and run through and do 6 TikToks, one for each race. But we'll see how we get on with that because TikTok, I'm not sure is going to be my thing, but I'll give it a try anyway. Obviously, all I'm trying to do is just do something a little bit different, and that's why I'm doing the content and stuff rather than just giving you a list of names who I think might win at Aintree. So, right, I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible because I know people are short on time, and it is the Aintree Festival after all. So, brilliant declarations have just come in for Thursday and Friday. No massive shocks. But they are very busy fields on the Friday. They seem to nearly almost all runners have declared. They've got full fields. And it looks like a brilliant week's racing. The main thing that I'll say is that this is not Cheltenham. So there are people out there, obviously, I'm not going to say, obviously, myself, personal stakes, but people bet 100, 200,000 pounds on Cheltenham. Obviously, you're going to do whatever you want to do, but my personal, I'd say you want to curb it slightly at Aintree. The main reason is the fact that most of the horses you're going to see at the top end of the market are going to have the best form, and that best form came at Cheltenham 4 weeks ago. There is no guarantee whatsoever that they're going to come here and repeat it. You even see the likes of like the Shishkins and the Altiors who put in mesmerising performances at Cheltenham, and they come here and they scrape home, and they're the top barrel horses. Whereas any horses below that sort of level, they may get away with it, they may not. So all I'm saying is the best form is going to be the Cheltenham winners and the Cheltenham place horses. Last year there were 6 horses that won at Cheltenham. They came here. How many won? 0. So that's all I'm saying. They are going to be short prices, and I'm pretty sure 5 of the 6 went off 5-2 or shorter, and obviously we're all beaten. The only one that was bigger was Delta Work because it was a Grand National, and obviously ran very well and came third. I'm not saying they can't win, and obviously different trainers, but don't be surprised to see a plenty of form reversed. And the reason why you normally want to curb slightly is because Aintree is brilliant to watch, brilliant all round, but you're going to see a lot of form reversals. A prime one would be last year, obviously, with the likes of Ahoy Senor, obviously turning over like horses like Bravemansgame, who had beat him in the Quarter Star at Kempton. Fury Road travelled really well that day, but Ahoy Senor got the better of him. And then you see them obviously comes into next season, and Bravemansgame absolutely smacks Ahoy Senor through basically, he beats him very well in the Charlie Hall chase, then beats him again in the Quarter Star. Then obviously he fell in the Gold Cup, but you would think he probably would have beaten there. So a lot of things happen at Aintree, and the big thing is the fact that because it's so close to Cheltenham, they do have an extra week's recovery. But we are seeing that from Ferry House, plenty of those runners, I did put a tweet up about it, there's plenty of runners already out that are underperforming. The likes of Allegoria Devassi, Instit was rated £20 below and has barely lifted a leg when coming to jumping throughout the season. And yeah, okay, had to give the horse weight, but should still have had £12 in hand and being a young, improving horse. Does that mean Allegoria Devassi is now not one to follow? No, not at all. It's just one of those. It came obviously too soon for her. If she'd waited until Punchestown and had, say, an 8-week break, would that have been the same result? There's no guarantee. I think obviously everything you're looking at is just taking it with a pinch of salt, which is why I'm saying just don't go steaming into the first favourite of the day and then being surprised when it gets beat, and then suddenly you're like it. And also another thing, everyone associates Aintree as a short festival. you have to remember it's not far off what Cheltenham is. You are looking at the equivalent of a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There is a lot of racing. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. So all I'm saying is just don't go mental. But at the end of the day, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to tell you what I'm going to do. Anyway, let's get to the racing. Enough of my waffling. You don't want to hear it anyway. So, right, first race of the day. And we're looking at the Mildmay Novices Chase, which is also the Marsh Chase from the Cheltenham form, 2 mile 4 novice chasers. Prime example, straight off the bat, we're looking at Stage Star, obviously winner of the Turners, 13 to 8 favourite. And straight into my view of what I've just mentioned was the fact that very hard race there. I say very hard, wasn't the hardest race, to be honest, because the fact that for some reason the Irish jockeys just gave the run of the race to Harry Cobden, and he took it with both hands. Obviously, not long till May finished second there, quite out of the blue, but the others weren't. They were too busy trying to fight each other. So you had Appreciator, Sergio Hard, and James de Burley. The two Mullins horses mullered Mighty Potter into the corner, setting it up as if they were the only three in the race. And Stage Star was just like, cheers, see you later. Didn't actually improve on his form of his handicap win, round to another 159. So you'd expect that if he runs to form, he's going to run to about a 159 again. And that could well be the case. But there's a few chomping on his heels, like St. Roy's only a pound below that last time out when finishing third in the Arkle. But I don't think he was really put into that race at any point. And then Banbridge was only his Irish Arkle form behind El Fabiolo is also not far behind that, only £3. So despite him being a shorter price favourite than the other two, there's not a lot in it. Visionary and a few are making cases for that, and I can see the angle, having not finished far behind St. Roy, and obviously Skip Cheltenham comes here fresh. Wouldn't be surprised if he blew this field apart by winning, as in a shock in the field. But at the same time, he's one that I could easily skip over. For me, I want to go with the fresh horse in Banbridge or St. Roy. St. Roy's doing something a bit different, obviously stepping up in the Arkle trip. A lot will depend on how this race plays out. So the front two, Banbridge and Stage Star, Banbridge, they are going to be, JJ Slevin's going to be keen not to let Stage Star have an easy lead. If they do, then he could well get away from this field. And if he doesn't underperform, then this could be his to lose. However, these two, Banbridge has been known to be race prominently or make all as well. So if these two could end up going off together, this could end up that those two go off together and then St. Roy leaves himself too much to do, much like the Arkle, and one of them just wins. The other side of things is these two do too much too soon, and it sets up perfectly for St. Roy. It's very, very difficult currently to have a bet in the race until I know that Banbridge is definitely going to run and what the ground is. So for me, all I can say to you is Stage Star won't be my selection because of the hard race he had at Cheltenham. I don't think St. Roy had an overly hard race at Cheltenham. And I think Banbridge comes here fresh. But one, I want to know for the ground. The ground is very important for Banbridge. And once I know the ground, then that might sway me. And also the prices. So will Banbridge be a 2-1 shot on the day? So it's between the second and third favourite. And that in the stats is very good, as in the stats point very strongly towards those two, with 10 of the 11 winners of this race not being favourite. So yeah, it's between those two for me, and it will just come down to ground. That'll be on my Twitter, but I'm just trying to give you some early content. Right, so the juveniles, where do you start with this? I think the Irish had the first 5 or 6 in the Triumph, and they had about the first 8 in the Boodles. I think there might have been one English horse in amongst all of those, so it's fairly obvious to see they have got an absolute wrap round of the juvenile form. Zenta, very worthy favourite. She's clear on ratings, on RPRs. She's got the best piece of form. She's getting weight from the whole field. She gets £7 mare's allowance. Obviously, your issue is we saw it already over in Ireland with Blood Destiny and Gust of Wind getting turned over by an 80-1 shot. So 80-1 might have been 33-1 shot. Basically by an outsider in a juvenile race, having both ran at Cheltenham. Like she had a hard race at Cheltenham. She laid it up with Lossiemouth. At one stage, she looked like she might even beat Lossiemouth. But that was only her third start of the season. But at the same time, this will be her third start in 8 weeks. So it's so tough to weigh up. If you're getting 2-1, 5-2, then maybe she's not such a bad price. But I'm not massively keen on backing juvenile favourites, and I'm also not keen on backing juvenile mares favourites. So I think she's got everything. She's got the perfect favourites chance, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to win. And I'm not going to stand here and put you off her if that's who you like in the race. Bo Zenith, I've never been a fan of ever since. You got the Blood Destiny form where he beat Blood Destiny, Their time was better than Lossiemouth's over in France, but came over, never lifted a leg when sent off 2-7 favourite and was awful on debut. Since then, at Haydock, looked well beaten, was first one off the bridle, but stayed on to win going away, and then won an egg and spoon race coming up. I just think he's way too short. 5-1 is not a good price. Nusret is the one that I'm interested in. Nusret came across for Joseph O'Brien. He's found it too tough over in Ireland, to put it quite simply. 16 lengths behind Lossiemouth, 18 lengths behind Blood Destiny. So he was clearly not the top notcher. But his form when beating Perseus Way in the Adonis is good enough to definitely feature in this sort of race. And if the favourite did fail to fire, he could be one to pick up the Preces. Despite the fact that we're talking about at the moment is good to soft, good in places. If the ground remains that sort of conditions, then that will suit him fine. But I just don't want to see it getting too soft for him. So at the moment, the play for me, Nusret's 11-2. So I'll probably end up going with Nusret, maybe without the favourite. But again, I will put my final selections on Twitter. But I think I like Nusret, and I can't put you off centre. It's just I'm not overly convinced. If you're getting 2-1, 5-2, then yeah, fair play. But I don't want to be taking 6-4. There are others in the race. Obviously, you've got Greyval, Scriptwriter. Scriptwriter, I've never really been a fan of. I thought it was a bit of a hyped horse, and mainly by the trainer himself, Milton Harris. This will suit a lot more with a flat track, but it got work to do to find 35 lengths with Nusret. Perseus Way just can't jump. Chaos Control is very interesting. Stuart Edmonds' runners at this meeting have got a very good record. And looks like a horse that's been slowly brought to the boil. Was well beaten 22 lengths of Perseus Way, but won by 22 lengths recently. And even though his RPRs are quite a bit lower than the likes of some of the others in here, we're not talking about world beaters here. Like his RPR recently was 122. Nusret's most recent was 125. So it's only Zenta that absolutely stands out with a 138. Like she's like £15 clear of the field. So it's only her form that stands out an absolute mile above this, which is why she's so hard to oppose as a favourite. So I wouldn't put you off Chaos Control, who's now 28-1. So that's definitely one I'm going to be backing. And then I'll decide between Nusret and Zenta. So Chaos Control, I'll go each way. And then it'll be Zenta or Nusret, depending on what the ground comes up like. Obviously, Nusret does not want any sort of soft, and also the prices of the favourite. Right, on to what people are billing as one of the races of the season. So the Betway Bowl. If this race was 8 weeks ago, this would be the race of the season. However, it's not. It's post Cheltenham, and I'm not here to put a damper on it because it is going to be a brilliant race regardless. But I could see these either all finishing in a heap, all finishing pulled up, or one horse just streaks away with the lot. You could easily find this just literally just picking the race up, just throwing it in the bin and saying, let's go again next year. This is a race where I would be taking a flyer on the outside of the field, had the outside of the field not ran. All of them have ran at Cheltenham. All of them have now got questions to answer. If you want the simple, anyone who's followed me for the last 2 years will know how much of a big fan I am of Bravemansgame. He has literally been perfect for us at every asking question. 2-1 in the Charlie Hall Chase from beating Ahoy Senor. Then we had him at 6-1 for the King George, or 11-4 even if you jumped in at last minute. And then he did nothing wrong in the Gold Cup when I wanted obviously Gallopin to win just for the bigger bet. But he literally has done everything to perfection. The problem is that was an absolute grueler of a race 4 weeks ago. The ground wasn't too bad, but he put his everything in and he did everything perfect. You could not have asked for a better run. And the problem is with Paul Nicholls, he is a brilliant trainer and he's a master, but it's just that hunger and the greed to get more and more wins and money. And you can't blame him for it in the fact that they're going to roll the dice here. I don't think he wanted to go to Punchestown to go and pitch in against Gallopin Des Champs. And you look at it with so many chinks in the armours of the rest that he's said, right, let's go for it here. But the problem is look through Bravemansgame form. I don't even need to do the clicks. When have his defeats come? He's come to Aintree twice. At the end of the season, he's been beaten twice. He was beaten over hurdles when he was sent off a short price favourite by Ahoy Senor, who was sent off, I think, 66-1 that day. But we didn't know how good Ahoy Senor was at the time. And Ahoy Senor beat him then. And then once again last season, I know he skipped Cheltenham last year, and they said that they was prepped to the yin-yang for Cheltenham, and then he skipped it. But again, he was turned over. He was not at his best. He was beaten by Ahoy Senor, and he was beaten by, I think it was Fury Road. And he just didn't run his race last year, and that was when he didn't go to Cheltenham. So for whatever reason, this is not his time of year. And as Nicholls have said, they love to get him fresh. And that's what I like about this horse. Like, they're talking about the Betfair Chase. I really hope they skip that. But next year, you go to Haydock, get the Charlie Hall in the bag, go to the King George. You might take on like Shishkin and the likes, but that'll give you a strong chance. Then go for the Gold Cup again, like perfect. But for me here, like everyone knows how much I love Bravemansgame, and if he wins here, I will not be disappointed at all. But he will win here without a single penny of my money. This is the only place where I'm happy to just let him run, because he's done so brilliantly throughout his whole season this year that it's just such a big ask to turn that around. A lot of horses after a Gold Cup run, like you're talking about, I think it was Might Bite, and who was the winner that day? The I can't remember off the top of my head. It was Might Bite and the Plodder. They went head to head, and they battled all the way to the line, and then you go forwards, and it's just like, I'm gonna have to find it. Apologies. Give me 2 seconds. This will not take long. Gold Cup. Past winners. Native River. Native River was the horse I was looking at. And it was Native River and Might Bite. And they went hammer and tong. And the ground was really bad that day. But obviously the ground wasn't bad at Cheltenham, but it's the amount that it takes out. Some horses, like people were asking me the question, when I said about putting Galloping up for next year, they were saying, will he even come back to that level of form? You won't know until you try, but it's important to just not rush these horses. And the difference between Nichols and Mullins is Nichols is brilliant, but Mullins is so rigid in his ways. So if he won last year, if he won the Charlie Hall Chase, King George Gold Cup, with Galopin Des Champs, those would be the exact races he would go again. He wouldn't alter it. Whereas Nichols he's so hungry, he just wants more, and he'd be like, right, how can I tweak it to win more? And I just don't agree with the placing it. If he wins, brilliant for Paul Nichols and stuff. But again, if he bombs, I'd throw that straight in the bin, just like I did last year when he got beat by Ahoy Senor. Shishkin, if Shishkin had skipped Cheltenham, I think Shishkin would be what you'd call a 3-1 certainty for this race. I think the 3 miles is going to be no issue to him. I just think he needs a bit of time. He needs it like that. He got rushed into Cheltenham 3 weeks, and for whatever reason, he was all over the shop, and like he couldn't jump. He couldn't find his feet. They're taking the tongue tie off. Like something's just didn't trick with him, and he still ran amazingly. But he was carried that day, like as in. It was just his pure talent and class that got him to even get to the end of that race. The fact that he came second was unbelievable. And obviously, you take the winner out, Envoy Allen, and he's managed to beat a fairly not amazing at Ryan Airfield, but he's managed to get up despite doing everything wrong in the race. But the problem is you're coming here and he's not any fresher. He's had a very hard race 4 weeks ago. So what Shishkin is going to turn up? I think everything about this race would be perfect for him. And if he had not run at Cheltenham, then I'd be coming here thinking this is the horse to beat. But that's a question mark. Again, could he win? Exactly the same as Bravemansgame. Yes, he could. But there's so many question marks. A Plutard, straight to his form. Since winning the Gold Cup in sublime fashion, he's got 2 P's next to his name. He ran no race whatsoever in the Betfair Chase. And then in the Gold Cup, plenty are arguing, saying that he actually ran a race. But I'm still not convinced on his form there that he ran any sort of race whatsoever. He was last when obviously he was hampered by Ahoy Senor. But that just looked like a perfect opportunity to say, yeah, okay, we've tried, but let's pull him up because it's not going well. So could he bounce back? Well, he's one that has probably got a likelier chance of bouncing back because he's not had a hard race so far this season. But at the same time, the question mark I was saying about Bravemansgame is he may not have had a hard race, but at what point are you going to say he's not actually come back from the Gold Cup, as in that Gold Cup that he won when he was absolutely mesmerising in 2022, so last March? Like, has he just left this mark on him and he's not going to come back to this horse? So again, he's another, I could see him blowing this field to bits if he has come out of it, but he didn't show me a lot in the Gold Cup to say, oh, he is the one to back here. Onto Ahoy Senor. So Ahoy Senor was running a blinder. I don't think he would have challenged the front 2 in the market, the first and second winner, but he could have been booked for third. He was jumping well, he was bucking and kicking and screaming, and he was loving it. But then obviously he made a mistake, just like he does, and it brought him down. This for him is his bag. He's 2 for 2 here. So you would argue, you'd say this is his time of year. And he also went to Cheltenham. He ran in the Brown Advisory, ran very well, finishing third. But that was a brutal fall that he took. So the 2 question marks for Hoy Senor for me is I think he's got less to prove at Aintree than others. But the 2 question marks, one is the fact of how much has that fall taken out of him? Basically weighing up the question of, was the fall better than him having a hard race? and obviously only the training, the connections, and people will know how much that took out of him. Like if he actually, like if it was a bad fall, did he hurt himself in any sort of way, or was he fine? He just got up the next day, just like a toddler falling over, grazes the knee, gets up, says moves on. So obviously only they know that. My negative for him, and don't all yell at me and say he's the best jockey and stuff, is I'm not a fan of Brian Hughes. I get it, he's a champion jockey. I think he's brilliant at certain tracks like the Kelsos, Carlisles, all of these sort of tracks. And people will say, yeah, well, Aintree's up his neck of the woods. I just don't rate him at this top level. I've not ever sat there in a Group One or a King George, and I know people are going to say, yeah, but he doesn't get the chances. Put it this way, if say, I don't know, if Nico de Boinville was doing all this as a champion jockey up north, he'd get the chances. Like Brian Hughes, there was a phase where he was getting chances for Group Ones and stuff like that, and I just don't see him as a Group One jockey. The other thing is, I think he is such an opposite riding style to what this horse needs. Derek Fox bucks this horse out, kicks and screams, and let's go. And it's like a bit like a Bryony Frost ride. Like Bryony would suit this sort of ride, whereas Brian Hughes isn't that sort of style. He's like almost like a Barry Geraghty, like a cool, composed, behind the saddle. Let's get him popping away. So at the same time, I still think of those ones mentioned, Ahoy Senor is the most likely to run his race. And I'm not here to knock any sort of jockey, so I'm not saying that Brian Hughes won't give this horse a good ride, but it's just a question mark for me. Conflated, another interesting one. And again, I'd say Ahoy Senor and Conflated. Conflated wasn't in the heat of the battle with the front two, but he still ran a brilliant race. And that wasn't an easy race. And he's coming here. Obviously, he does come here fresh. He's only had 3 runs this year, one in November. He won the Irish Gold Cup, and then obviously he comes here. But and the difference was here is that he's been to Aintree and he ran very well when finishing behind Clan des Obu in this last year. So again, arguably, you'd say maybe he's the bet. But again, it wasn't an easy race. He was only beaten 13 and a half lengths, and he wasn't given an easy time. Keith Donoghue retains the ride. And then Garlaw, I just think the fact that he's gone to the Ryanair and he's been well beaten there, especially by Shishkin, 50 to 1 is probably about his price. So for me, this is such a tough race. And if you're gonna be completely honest with yourself and you want to be disciplined, like as in from my perspective, this is a watch. And you know me, I do not like to sit and watch and not bet. If you force me to say who I think could run their race, Ahoy Senor and Conflated, because they're the bigger prices. They're around the 6 to 1 mark. But there's so many question marks, and it's hard to see. Like the only horse that I could see really affecting markets going forwards is if Shishkin was to win this really well, his price for the Gold Cup next year and the King George would both evaporate. But at the same time, if he doesn't, then they're going to get bigger. So it's just something you want to think about. Like obviously, I've backed Bravemansgame at 7 to 2 for the King George. You may want to find some sort of cover that if Shishkin wins here and he could win the King George, but will he even run his race? Will he lift a leg? Will he plough through the first 3 and get pulled up? I have no idea. So for me, it's an easy no bet. But if you were forced to have one, I'd prefer to go outsiders than insiders. It's a brilliant race, and one horse could blow this field to bits. But whether you're going to take the form seriously going forwards is another question mark. Right, keep this short. Aintree Hurdle, Constitution Hill. I think he'll win. He'll probably win by further. I doubt he'll come off the bridle. The only question mark will be the fact that obviously when you're putting up these mesmerising performances, normally he's having a good break between them. He's only having 4 weeks between his last one and this one, but he just looks an absolute freak. Like I genuinely don't. It's so hard to pick a hole. I think between the horses that will chase him home will be between Epatante and Charger. I think I'll like to move it. They might try and ride him a bit more conservatively. Constitution Hill might just go for making all here, but there's no guarantee of that. So I think it'll be between Epatante and Charger. If Epatante bounces back, she was electric in this one, beating Zana here. So she could well be the one for the forecast, but with a horse like Constitution Hill, you can just watch him. And I do think it's becoming more and more ominous that there's a strong chance. Because I think if they win this, they're getting bored over hurdles already. They've beaten everything that's in sight. And anything that is going to, say, like a Marine National and Pair Pass, all of those, they've already openly said that they're going over fences if he stays hurdling. So he's going to end up facing even a weaker field. And I think the connections are too ambitious. They're going to get bored of it. He will 1 over 2 miles, Group 1. He would have took a 2 mile 4 over Group 1 over hurdles, and they'll say, let's go fences. Where he goes, no idea. But obviously Henderson loves the Arkle and Champion Chase. So my bet, first one would be the Arkle, and then they may well go Arkle Champion Chase and then something like the Gold Cup, but who knows? We are guessing, but I do think he goes over fences, and I think Arkle is the most likely because Henderson loves the race. I don't think you get a lot out of going between the Arkle and the Turners. Right, onto the Fox Hunters. There are people out there who study this for a living. They'll be at the races columns where someone looks at point to point form all year round and they can tell you everything about these long price runners. And okay, if you want to go for those, go for those. I totally appreciate that. And I'm not one who's going to stand there because I don't want to stand there and put up 33 to 1 shots when I don't know enough about them. So I might end up putting one or two up in on the day just for like a pound or whatever. But for me, the selections that I want to go with are the horses that I know are already proven at this level of form, and unfortunately, that means that they are shorter in the prices. Over the last 5 years, you've had it's been a mixture of short prices. Last year, it was around the 5 to 1 shot. Then the 4 years before that, they were all big prices. Like I think 4 of the 5 were over 10 to 1, but then the 3 before that, they were all below 5 to 1. So it's a mixed bag. I think the two to focus on are fairly obvious. I'm not telling you anything you probably don't already know. Late Night Pass has got form figures of a first and a second in this race. You know that that he handles the track, handles the national fences, and has got a more than adequate jockey. Won this race very well last year, and the year before finished second. So I'll be shocked if out of the frame, and you probably get 3, 4, 5 places. So if you do each ways or whether you do wins, but Late Night Pass is as solid as they come in this race. Very similar form around the point to point scene this year. Comes in with a rock solid chance. And unlike a lot of races, as they get older, you get more and more complaints. This age is not a forlorn hope in races like this. 8, 9, 10-year-olds will be winning this all the time. And then the one that's obviously the new kid on the block. Obviously, it's a bit unfortunate. David Christie, everyone was expecting him to mop up all of these, and he's had 2 of his short prices beaten. With obviously Vorsoleil running a strong race, but not finishing out at all at Cheltenham. And then obviously Fern's Lot getting turned over, which was very surprising with a weakened Billaway having gone to Cheltenham. So wing leader, you'd say, oh, what's the question with the yard? But I don't think that'll be a problem here. And his form with Billaway last year, obviously he absolutely thumped Billaway for a career best at Thurles when he beat him 12 lengths. And then at Cheltenham, he looked home and hosed. But he just ended up tiring in like the closing stages, and it was a phenomenal ride when Billaway they got up in the dying strides last year. But that form puts him up in the RPRs a lot higher than all the rest of these. But that's only because you can compare it because it's rules form. He's been kept fresh in the fact that he's just been pottering around in point to points. Like his last run, he was sent off 2 to 7 favourite 3 weeks ago. He won by 28 lengths. So as much as the fact you look at it and you say, oh, he's had a recent run to put him spot on for this by the looks of it. And obviously a 28 length victor. This, I think, obviously that race in the Fox Hunters, so he was beaten by Billaway last year, was over 3 mile 2. This is back to 2 mile 5 furlongs and a bit. So between 2 mile 5 and 6. I think his prominent running style, this will suit perfectly, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's out clear. Like he could end up winning this by quite a distance. But at the same time, he might not, because obviously it's so hard to read the rest of the point form below. But for me, he's quite standout. He's around the 7 to 2, 4 to 1 mark, and I could easily make a case to say that he should be shorter. Barry O'Neill, a brilliant jockey. He's not had the best run at Cheltenham, but obviously we'll see what he's got here at Aintree. And I'd expect him to be either prominent or at least in the first few. And those two would be quite strong plays for me of the lot out of those. I might put up like a 33 or a 50 to 1 shot on the day once I've done a bit more research. But those two, Late Night Pass and Wing Leader, they're both rock solid. And I know people say, yeah, but you've got to take a swing at one on this. I want one that's going to give me a run for my money. And those two are going to give me a run for my money. So that's my pick. Right, onto the Red Rum Handicap Chase. So this is the 2 mile equivalent, the Grand Annual of Cheltenham coming to Aintree. I thought third time lucky all year. This was his race. He was prepped. His mark was perfect. Everything was going in his favour. However, they ran him at Sandown and he won. And I was like, why have you done this? And obviously, I don't think they expected him to win. I don't think Keelan Woods expected him to win, but he got so close that he had to be pushed out to win. And he won well there. And he ran an absolute screamer in the Grand Annual. He jumped, he travelled, and he was featuring. He was very close coming into the home turn, despite it being awful ground. It was soft ground there. But the problem is for both those two runs is that he now comes here off £5 higher than that Sandown win. So like he's basically given some weight back. The positive is that Skeltons have great records in handicaps here, so I just think they might have gone to the well too much. This will be his third run in the best part of, yeah, third run in 8 weeks. Um, so have they gone to the well? I won't be surprised if he's to go close or if he even wins, but I just think he's short enough as favourite for a horse that's obviously, he was fourth in the Grand Annual, he didn't win it, and he's also £5 higher than when he won at Sandown. So I just think it would have been a plot, but it's not anymore. The horse I'm actually going to go with is Douglas Talking. He's one of very few that fit all the stats boxes. I'm not going to run through them all, but you'll see them on my blog. It's a very niche stats according to this season, just because there's not many that fit into the category. But he's just looked a reformed character since coming back this year. He came back after a win-dock, and since then he's ran two very good races, and he's just not looked even remotely close to being beat. Winning by 8 lengths and 13 lengths. And he looked very impressive at Sandown. The thing I like about Sandown is it's a strong jumping test, which means that you know he's not going to struggle around Aintree. My one reservation was the jockey booking. Like they could have claimed here, Patrick Wodge ran on him last time and is a £7 claimer. And he bolted up and he gave him a brilliant ride, popped every fence. So it's strange here to see Stephen Mulqueen coming back in. Stephen Mulqueen has rode the horse twice, both over hurdles and over fences. I didn't think either time the horse really like responded in a rhythm for him that got me excited. So I just find it strange. And also, obviously, if you're claiming £7, that's another bonus. That's another £7 off the bat. Then the obviously the other side of that is the fact that do they think that he's well in enough that he don't need to claim the £7? So he's one of very few coming in with a very different profile, because most of these are coming in, they've either been plotted but they've got plenty of experience, or you're looking at one that's a second season novice chaser that could be improving, and that's what this horse looks like. He's ran a 134 last time and a 141 RPR this time, and yeah, okay, he's coming in here. He's coming in here at £10 higher mark than what he was before. But the race before that, he was put up £6 and he made mincemeat of them, winning by 13 lengths. The other side of the coin is the fact that they were in small fields. This would be a bigger field, but at the same time, it's not a massive field for a handicap. And this looks a weak race. It's only 14 runners. So I think at 5 to 1, 11 to 2, I think he's a fair shout. Global Citizen ran a screamer, finishing in front of Third Time Lucky. He was one of my Cheltenham plays. Can't put you off him, but at the same time, it's just trying to get a fresher horse from the Cheltenham. Dancing on My Own and The Last Day finished 1-2 in this last year. The Last Day somehow finds himself on a £1 lower mark than last year, whereas Dancing on My Own is now, I think Dancing on My Own is now running off. Dancing on My Own is running off £3 higher, whereas The Last Day is running off £1 lower, which is actually pretty. Is that correct? 133. Oh no, he's running off £2 higher. He's running off £2 higher, but he's even more well in than with Dancing on My Own. So what's strange is the fact that how on earth has he got away with that sort of mark? Like it's almost criminal, because okay, yeah, you look back to Dancing on My Own, he was only 2.5 lengths, but you look back further, and there was 17.5 lengths were back to Shake 'em Up Harry, who's a solid handicapper, and Sky Pirate, who we know is as solid as they come in the handicapping world. So if you take the second place out, he's literally battered them 17 lengths. And he's coming in here with the exact same profile. You look last year, he finished 5th of 8, 21 lengths beaten, 6th of 6, 27 lengths beaten, and then he fell in January. He comes here again, 5th of 7, 20 lengths beaten, and then he was pulled up in the Grand Annual, and that you could tell he wasn't interested. The connections weren't interested in that race because he was out the back from the start. He missed the start. He was already a couple of lengths in the rear, and they just did whatever they needed to do to get into him, and then they were like, "Yep, that'll do for us. Cheers, we'll pull him up now." So not to say that racing's corrupt in any sort of way, but I just think personally that was the plan. So for me, yeah, Douglas Talking, around 5 to 1, 11 to 2, and I'd definitely be having a saver on The Last Day, because although he's an 11-year-old and the stats are massively against 10 and 11-year-olds, he broke the record, the stats last year, winning as a 10-year-old, so it wouldn't surprise for me to see him doing it as an 11-year-old. Dancing on My Own is obviously very interesting with the fact that he came second, but he is weighted. He's not weighted to reverse the form in The Last Day. So if they both run their race, then he'll finish behind. If Dancing on My Own doesn't run, if the Dancing on My Own improves, then obviously he could have the beating. But yeah, Douglas Talking in The Last Day for me. So the mare's flat bumper. My big red writing just says straight away don't back favourites in this, but obviously it is talking about backing like 6 to 4 shots and stuff. And also I say don't back favourites. The favourite who won this last year went from 6 to 1 into 9 to 4, and that was none other than Willie Mullins' sole representative, known as Ashro Diamond. So as we've seen, Ashro Diamond is quite the tool. So there's nothing to say you can't back favourites in this whatsoever, but it's just treading carefully because mares don't often, sometimes they don't repeat their form. So this is a very interesting race. I'll start with the two that are coming over from Ireland, Jolie Coeur Allen and July Flower for Mullins and Walsh. Mullins and Henry de Bromhead. The stable talk and the chitter chatter is the fact that these two are keeping their novice status, but they're also the fact that they're going to be their world is going to be novice hurdling next year. Like as in they're not going to be drilled to the yin yang to win a race like this. They could well have the talent, and they finished first and second in a French bumper. July Flower finishing ahead, but at the same time they may not be hard pressed to come here and to run as in for their lives, if that makes sense. So it's such a hard race to weigh up. So for me, and obviously the horse that I like the most is the mare's novice favourite at the moment at 10-1, and that's See You in My Dreams. She's currently around the 7-2, 4-1 market, but Paul Nicholls has already come out and said she's become quite buzzy since winning that, and she was very composed at Newbury, and she literally blew your eyes out with how well she won that race. Obviously, the form hasn't amounted to anything yet because we haven't seen most of them in behind. So going forward, it'll be interesting to see how she goes and how she gets on. I think she's a play if you can get 4 or 5-1, but she might not be a play until 10 minutes before the off, just because of the fact that you really aren't going to know how buzzy she's going to be until you get to the paddock. One that does take my eye is K Tara Tara, so 33-1. Alan King's got a good record in this race. It is the second string, but I just thought she was staying on really well when she finished behind Politicus, but she was sidling through the field. Like you could make a case for so many of these in here because they've all got 2s and 1s to their name. So it makes sense to take a flyer. So my 2 in the race will be the K Tara Tara at 33-1 and See You in My Dreams at 7-2, 4-1. But if you can hold off, then I would to wait and see how she goes in the paddock. So right, on quick summary, 145. It'll be St. Roy or Banbridge for me, depending on ground and if Banbridge actually runs. 220, I think Zenza's going to take all the beating, but I don't want to back her at 6-4. Chaos Control is definitely an each way bet at 28-1 for me, and I'll back either Nuzret or Zenta depending on price and ground. The 255, I don't really want to get involved. If you were forced, I'd go towards the bigger prices of a Hoy Senior and Conflated, but it's a no bet race. Constitution Hill in the 330 will just hack up, no doubt. Wing Leader and Late Night Pass in the 405, and I'll try and look for a bigger price one, but I haven't got one currently. 440, Douglas Talking around the 5-1 mark would be a win bet for me. And then also the last day would be a cover bet at around the 11-1, 12-1 mark. And in the 515, See You in My Dreams around the 7-2, 4-1 mark, and also K Tara Tara at 33-1 or bigger would be an each way play. And obviously, See You in My Dreams, you might want to wait until you get the ground confirmation. So that is day 1 complete. So let's roll on to. In fact, you know what? I'm going to cut it there, and I'll go to day 2 as a separate video.